Welcome to the Week 13 edition of the Sharp Football Show. We're going to break down and recap everything that we saw on Monday night, that crazy game with the Cleveland Browns and the Denver Broncos, as well as go back and look at some of the things that we saw on Sunday that maybe decided some of the games that were played on Sunday. And then, of course, we're going to look ahead to this upcoming week of football. There's only a few weeks left. We're already in December. There's only a few more weeks of the NFL regular season. I hope everybody is having a fabulous Tuesday. As a reminder, we are here with you guys every single Tuesday and Friday live at noon Eastern with a show that talks about what we're going to be expecting for the upcoming weekend's games, especially that Friday show where we dive into some of our best bets and predictions for what we anticipate. And of course, this past Friday gave out two more longest bets, and we hit both of those. So I think we're now on like something like a 7-1 run on those. I want to say it's like 16 or 17 and 7 on the year, 17 and 8. We'll get the regular records up by the time we get to next week, but we've obviously been absolutely obliterating it for the longest bets that we give out at the end of the show on Friday. So if you guys are new here, stick around. We're going to be back with you on Friday where we're going to break down some of our best bets in college, NFL, and from the props market. Make sure that you're subscribing over on YouTube. Search for Sharp Football Analysis. That's where you can find us. That's where you can participate in the chat, which we got Exile up here. First quarter hit for 3 straight weeks since we talked about it. So Chase Davis points that out, that the Packers bet that we talked about on this show that I gave out to subscribers, I want to say that was during free week, if I'm not mistaken, a few weeks ago. They have now continued to be very aggressive early on in games. Let's talk about that for a second. Good point that you make there, Chase and Exile. Good to see you. Good day to everybody. If you recall, correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody's out there and listening in the chat, and go over to YouTube and contribute, but I believe that on Thanksgiving, the Detroit Lions playing the Chicago Bears, Dan Campbell won the toss and took the football. He did not defer to the second half. He took the football, and the Detroit Lions started with the football. And the reason I say that is interesting is because the Detroit Lions are playing the Green Bay Packers on Thursday. And what's going to be fascinating, if that was the case, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, go back and look at the box score, see if that was the case, if they won the toss and requested the football. Then you're going to have this interesting dynamic where the Packers have always been starting with the football because they always request the football every single time, and their opponents always defer, and so the Packers pretty much are always starting with the football. Do the Detroit Lions take the football if they win the toss and throw off sort of that mojo that the Green Bay Packers, like play a little psychological warfare with the Green Bay Packers to start that game? That will be fascinating, and I think it would be outstanding if Dan Campbell were to do that. Producer Matt says the Bears did indeed kick off to start the game versus Detroit. So maybe Detroit won the toss and requested the football. That's what I'm still curious of. But we know that Detroit definitely did start with the football. That'd be a little psychological warfare. I'd be curious to see if that ends up happening there. For Thursday night's game, Green Bay versus Detroit, a massively important game. You know what's fascinating? Vikings took the ball first versus the Packers as well. Exile side. That was the game, if I'm not mistaken, Exile. I believe, because I was looking through it in my notes, I believe that the Green Bay Packers won the toss but deferred. It was the only time all year that they deferred. That was because Jordan Love had a banged up knee. It was his first game back, and they were trying to do something a little different, hoping they could force a 3-and-out and then get the ball in potentially better field position. Something along those lines. I'm pretty sure the Packers won the toss and deferred, and it was the only game this year that they did defer the toss. And it was Love's first game back. So I'm looking forward to that game. It's crazy how that NFC North, you've got a 10-1, 11-1 Detroit Lions. You got the 10-2 Minnesota Vikings. You got the 9-3 Green Bay Packers. That NFC North is jam-packed with talent. And the whole NFC, like if you look at the graphics where it says like in the hunt, it's got like your first round bye. Then below that, it typically says like who the number 2 seed is. Then it's got the rest of the division leaders. Then it's got your wild card seeds. And then it says who's in the hunt. And in the NFC, all the teams that are in the hunt are 6-6 or better, right? They're all at or above 500. And in the AFC, you've got the 4-8 Cincinnati Bengals are still down there listed as in the hunt. Just the AFC does not have that. There's teams down at the bottom, just like the NFC does. The NFC is a lot more competitive this year. So I'm really interested to see how this game of utmost importance plays out on Thursday night, Detroit versus Green Bay. We'll talk about that a little bit later on because we won't be seeing you guys until Friday after that game concludes. With that said, let's see. According to the report, the Lions won the toss and deferred to the Bears. I don't know what we'll figure out. I'm pretty sure that the Lions requested the football there, but we'll see. At any rate, why don't we dive into the first topic, Matt? There's some very interesting and a very interesting angle here that cropped up from the conclusion of this Baltimore Ravens game that I thought was interesting. And then I dug into some of the numbers because we bet some of the props in this way historically. And I wanted to point out an observation that I had and something that I think needs to change if the Baltimore Ravens want to get to whatever ceiling it is. And it affected them last year, and it's affecting them a little bit this year already. So let's roll that first intro, Matt. All right. In the aftermath of the Baltimore Ravens' loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, Lamar Jackson was at his press conference, and he talked about the fact that he should have taken some more of the run lanes, and it was a mistake on his part, and his mom pointed that out to him immediately after the game. Let's play this clip, Matt, of what Lamar Jackson said in his post-game interview.
Yeah, my mama just told me that. She just cussed me out, so like I'm mad, so like we gonna get after it. Like, I ain't gonna lie to you, we gonna get after it. I can't wait till this body get on. Like, we got the Giants coming up. I'm ready to go. Like I'm just ready to go.
So what did she cuss you out about?
She said it was lanes I should have took, ran. But I was just trying to let guys develop routes. We had developing routes. I was just trying to go through my progression. But yeah, she right. Yeah. I'm gonna do my shit. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for this. I'm just mad because I feel like we should win these games and we not getting them done.
So he's talking about the lanes, the run lanes that he probably should have taken. His mom pointed it out to him after the game, specifically cussed him out about it. And we'll see if he takes her advice. But the data certainly is showing that Lamar Jackson needs to run the football a little bit more. And one of the things that we've been doing in the prop market historically is, and this is not just us, it's pretty much everybody, the lines get inflated as well, is you look around the league at some of the quarterbacks that have similar run rates to Lamar Jackson when you're talking about Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, and to a lesser extent, Patrick Mahomes. But Matt, why don't you pop up this next graphic here? So over there on the left-hand side is week 12 onward. You can put me up in the bottom right if you're able to. From week 12 onward, quarterback in games where the team wins by 11 plus points. So it's over a double-digit win, right? Like they're winning the game, and in many cases is pretty comfortable. You could see the average rushing attempts. This dates back to 2002. So we're working with just over 2 years of data. We're entering year 3 now because we are approaching week 14. And you look at Jalen Hurts, he's averaging about 8.6 rushing attempts per game. Lamar is about 8.5, so very similar to Jalen Hurts in big wins. Josh Allen at 5.5 and Patrick Mahomes at 2.8. But you then look at what these guys are doing, and this includes the playoffs, by the way. Then you look at what these guys are doing in games that are close late in the season, right? Late in the season, you might have preserved your body earlier on. It's now late in the season or in the postseason, and the game is close. It's a game that's being decided by within 10 points. Jalen Hurts is running the ball about 2.5 times more frequently than he is in the games that are bigger wins. And I take out kneel downs, by the way. This does not include kneel downs. This includes scrambles and design runs. Josh Allen is up to 8.8. That's over 3 more carries per game is what Josh Allen is doing. Patrick Mahomes is up as well in terms of he's running the football a little bit more frequently, though not as much as these other guys. Lamar Jackson is running the ball less frequently in these close and tight games. And you see even his per game yards are down by nearly 20 rushing yards per game less when the game is close and it's late in the season, as opposed to when the game is a blowout. And this is something that, in my opinion, has got to change for the Baltimore Ravens. If any of you guys were on the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC Championship game at home against the Kansas City Chiefs, you probably remember exactly what I'm talking about here. There are many times when the game is tight and the game is a big game that Lamar seems to scramble around to hang in the pocket, hang behind the line of scrimmage for far too long before doing one of 3 things. Taking a sack, number 1. Number 2, choosing to scramble, which oftentimes does not result in as much upside as it otherwise would have if he took an open run lane a lot earlier in the snap. Or 3, tries to fire the football from clearly he's outside the pocket, he's moving, and he doesn't have his feet set. And so it's far less likely to be an accurate completion as opposed to an inaccurate on the move across his body, chucking the ball down the field and hoping that there's a completion there. And sometimes his guys are wide open and it's still incomplete, as we saw with Isaiah Likely in the potentially big gain against the Philadelphia Eagles where they were up 9-0, could have put them up by 3 scores potentially. But that was an opportunity there. But there are other times where the guys are wide open and he's able to complete it. But Lamar Jackson needs to take advantage of these situations to run the football. The most perfect play in the NFL, the play that delivers the highest floor, it may not deliver the highest ceiling, but it delivers the highest floor from an EPA per play perspective, is when a quarterback on a designed pass play keeps the ball and runs through an open run lane. He is not scrambling as a result of pressure. He is scrambling because a run lane opens up in the defensive line. And he just chooses, I'm taking it. First read covered, I'm taking the run lane. So you could drop this, Matt, drop the graphic, but this is exactly what Lamar needs to focus on more in these big games. He is trying to prove himself as a passer. He is trying to show people, I can win these games as a pocket quarterback. We already know Lamar can win as a pocket quarterback. He has had success. Maybe he hasn't won a Super Bowl, but he has proved from a statistical perspective that he can dominate even when he's inside the pocket throwing the football. You don't need to prove that anymore. What you need to do is win playoff games, win big games, win a Super Bowl. And the way that you're going to do that is by taking advantage of your God-given ability that any other quarterback doesn't have. He's more evasive, elusive, and faster than Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. He needs to take advantage. Those guys are running the ball 3 more times per game in those big, close games. And Lamar is in those big, close games, and he's running it less, nearly 20 yards per game less. He's trying to hang around in the pocket. And you could try to tell me and argue, and it'd be a good argument to try to make, that like, oh, the defenses are playing him differently in these games, and they're preventing those runs. There were running lanes open against the Philadelphia Eagles. There were running lanes open against Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And Lamar Jackson just was not taking them. He was trying to be too much of a pocket quarterback in those moments, as opposed to getting the ball, running with the football down the field. Lamar Jackson can do that. He's great when he tries. And the key is, this is the key. You don't want to be going through 3 reads, scrambling all around the pocket, and then trying to run. What you want to be doing is, if you see that run lane is open after your first read, just take it. You may not be able to complete a 20-yard pass down the field, but you're probably, if that run lane is open, going to get 10 yards. Slam dunk the 10 yards and try to go for a 20 to 25 yard completion down the field later when the defense is blocking up those run lanes and you need to be passing the football in those situations. And guess what else will happen? The defense will then have to change their strategy. If you're able to have success early in a game running the football and these run lanes are opening up, then the defense might say, hey, what we wanted to do and tried to do entering this game is no longer working. We have to make an adjustment. We have to spy him differently. We have to figure out some other solution to stop Lamar from running. And all of a sudden, it might compromise that secondary a little bit more. But if you start out the game playing as a pocket quarterback and you're not trying to take advantage of those situations, and the only time that you're running the football is when all of your reads are gone and you're being pressured and flushed out of the pocket, then you're like most every other quarterback out there. And that's not what sets Lamar Jackson different. That's not what makes him as special as he is. What makes him special is his ability to run with the football down the field. In addition to being a great quarterback, he's accurate, he is successful, but he needs to take those things that most other quarterbacks can't do and emphasize them and amplify them come close game situations, like Jalen Hurts does, like Josh Allen does, like Patrick Mahomes does. And Lamar's going the opposite way, needs to turn that around. Okay, Ian says Lamar needs to deploy situational running like Mahomes. Absolutely right. Exile, Mama knows best. Lamar Jackson, more hitting those lanes. Yes, absolutely. Jimmy Football, what a great stat. This type of stuff is gold. Yeah, Exile, Lamar's the only one who is running less, and Tyler needed Lamar for fantasy to run the football a little bit more frequently. So you're and Jimmy, you come back and say that to Ian that if you run a few planned runs, it will open up some of the deep throws as the defense creeps up. Exactly what I'm getting to here. It's not necessarily a planned run though. It's when it's a designed pass play, and on average you're hoping for like 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Some games you'll have more, but right, 8.5. You get the average, the NFL average on a quarterback drop back with an open run lane and the quarterback scrambles. The NFL average is about 8.3 yards per carry. So the average quarterback, we're not talking about a guy as good as Lamar. We're talking about an average quarterback. Anybody who's running through that lane, they're averaging about what a good quarterback is completing on a yards per attempt basis. So Lamar himself needs to absolutely try to take advantage of those run lanes and those opportunities. Okay. Matt, why don't we go to our next topic? All right, I want to talk a little bit about this whole Trevor Lawrence dialogue and what we saw. Everybody's seen this by now, so I'm not going to belabor this too much. But in case you were sleeping under a rock for the past 2 days and didn't see the highlight, I tweeted this out during the game. Matt, why don't you pull up the first clip that shows Trevor running with the football and getting destroyed.
At the hospital, those cleats represent so many special people.
Oh, there's no doubt that Trevor represents them. Oh my, that'll be Al-Shaair who's flagged for the big hit on the slide, and that's going to start a little bit of a scrum afterwards as the Jaguars come in to protect their QB.
All right, so you can pull this down now, but basically we have the whole aftermath, which a brawl ensued. It wasn't really too violent of a brawl, but it took up a bunch of time. There were additional penalties. Obviously, he got ejected from the game. And then we have yesterday's comments by DeMeco Ryans, the head coach of the Houston Texans. There was obviously a lot of uproar about the hit, about the violence of the hit, about the consequences of that hit, which were Trevor Lawrence knocked out of the game with a concussion. He's in the concussion protocol. The fact is, that there are sometimes quarterbacks that will try to slide late, will try to get those extra yards. This to me wasn't really that type of a situation. We've seen a lot more situations where quarterbacks have slid late and the defenders get flagged for hits, but they don't come close to a hit of this kind of caliber. That one was a pretty brutal hit with a little bit more time to react differently by that defender. I know it's not always easy, but there are times when the hits are less severe and the slide is even later than what we saw here. So there was, rightfully so and justifiably so, a lot of outrage among the Jacksonville Jaguars for you can't hit our quarterback like this. And among the, if you were watching the game and you saw the commentary from the announcers, I think it was the old running back John Lynch who was on the game call, and he thought that the hit was atrocious and bad for the game, et cetera, et cetera. You can't do this type of thing. And obviously all the dialogue in the media over the last 24 hours really echoed those sentiments about this not being appropriate, acceptable, something that the league should look to, make sure does not happen and potentially suspend the player. So then DeMeco Ryans comes out yesterday evening and has this to say about it.
We stand behind Azeez and everything, that came from that. Of course, he unfortunately hit on the quarterback, but it's twofold, right? I mean, a lot of the quarterbacks in this day and age, they try to take advantage of the rule where they slide late and they try to get an extra yard. And you're a defender, a lot of onus is on the defender, right? Whether it's on the sideline or where it's on the quarterback, you don't know what a guy's thinking. You don't know if a guy's standing up and he's continuing to run. You don't know. And then you get a late slide and you hit the guy. Unfortunate that Trevor got hurt. We hope Trevor is okay, but it's also if we're sliding, we have to get down. If we're getting out of bounds, we get out of bounds. And that rule is there to protect the quarterbacks. And we want our quarterbacks to be safe in the league. So we just have to be safe. If we're sliding, make sure we're keeping our heads down. So, and the entire thing is, Azeez hits the guy, but their sideline overreacts. And it turns into a melee. It wasn't our guys. It's their team overreacted, pushed our guy, dragging our guy to the sideline. So that's uncalled for on that side. We have to be better on the sidelines as well with both teams.
So, to me, I found those comments to be pretty wild, simply because he's basically blaming Trevor Lawrence for getting the concussion because he didn't slide right, he didn't slide at the right time, and he needs to get his head down more when he's sliding. All these, coaching points about how Trevor Lawrence needs to slide. And then secondly, blaming the Jacksonville Jaguars for defending their player. And the thing that, I understand a coach is not trying to lose his locker room, right? We know DeMeco is not trying to lose his locker room. His team is in the playoff hunt. So there's other ways to kind of get across the point that I'm defending my player than to take it to the extent that he did, in my opinion, with those comments, which were relatively over the top and not really appropriate for the situation, in my opinion. Like going the route of blaming the bench for starting a fight. I think the league then came out and wanted to really show that this is not acceptable any way, shape, or form. And I don't know that they went further with the punishment than they otherwise would, but the fact that DeMeco came out and said things to that extent, the league really came down hard on Azeez in the suspension that they handed down. And Matt, if you could pull up that graphic right now, I want to read directly from the graphic where he says, I'm looking at the third paragraph. Video shows you striking the head and neck area of Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence after he clearly goes down in a feet-first slide. You led with your forearm and helmet and delivered a forceful blow to the head and neck area of your opponent when you had time and space to avoid such contact. All of that is true. There was time, there was space. He didn't have to raise the forearm to the head and neck area. If he got caught up in a tackle, he could have just tried to tackle him in some other way rather than the way that he did it. After the illegal hit, you proceeded to engage in a brawl, which you escalated when you pulled an opponent down to the ground by his face mask. After the referee announced that you were disqualified for the hit and your unsportsmanlike acts, you removed your helmet and re-engaged with your opponent while walking down and across the field, which started another physical confrontation near the end zone. Your lack of sportsmanship and respect for the game of football and all those who play, coach, and enjoy watching it is troubling and does not reflect the core values of the NFL. Your continued disregard for NFL playing rules puts the health and safety of you and your opponents in jeopardy and will not be tolerated. So that was pretty strong. And I think the way that they worded that was extra strong in light of D'Amico Ryans trying to claim that this had anything to do with the way Trevor Lawrence was sliding or the technique that he was using or the fact that he didn't duck his head the right way or the fact that like the Jaguars got upset because their player got hit and rushed out there to try to defend him. The NFL was very clear and very specific about listing out every little thing that this guy did that was unacceptable by, you know, the rules committee and whoever was writing up that memo. So I really like D'Amico Ryans. I think he's doing a good job overall. I don't agree with all of the strategies that their offensive coordinator is employing, and whether or not D'Amico is influencing that or not, I'm not sure, but I don't love when defensive coordinators get an offensive coordinator to play more conservatively or too close to the vest, especially on early downs, especially early in the game. You guys know me by now. I am the type of guy, and the coaches that I've worked with, start fast, start aggressive, first quarter and on early downs, and try to build that lead as quickly as possible. And then you can play around with things and tone it down later on in the game and in the second half. And you've seen a variety of teams having a lot of success doing that. Philadelphia Eagles, the year they went to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. You see the Buffalo Bills for years doing that as well. These are play aggressive early. And the Houston Texans do have a good track record of scoring in the first half, so I can't fault them for doing that. But their style of play on early downs obviously leaves a lot to be desired. But I just thought those comments from D'Amico were a little unnecessary. And if the shoe was on the other foot, and this is CJ Stroud, who is the one who is sliding a hair late, he would probably be upset with the hit. And he also probably would be not upset at all if his team rushed out and tried to defend their quarterback who got destroyed. And so the fact that he would take such a strong stance when just because the shoe's on the other foot, to me, doesn't sit quite right. I agree, Exile. I don't ever remember the NFL using language like that in regards to player safety and player behavior. And again, I think it's because he's a repeat offender, coupled with the fact that you saw the coach lobbying strongly that like this is very, very much so Trevor Lawrence bears some of the burden, if not a lot of the burden for this play. And the league was not having any of that with those comments. So at any rate, we'll see what ends up happening this week. This game is a really fascinating game, the Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans, in that the season is done for both of these teams. You've got two coaches that, I don't know, for Doug, it could be close to the end. I think it should be close to the end for Doug Peterson. Now he's going to be calling the game for Mac Jones. You've got the Tennessee Titans who, you know, they have a new head coach, a first-year head coach, but hasn't been all that impressive. Certainly just that team did not even show up in DC last week. They completely just no-showed and mailed that game in. How are they going to respond? Are they going to respond? Sitting here at, 3-9? The season is done. It's December. You're playing the Jaguars. Like, how much effort are you going to put into this game on both sides of the ball? And you're playing with, obviously a quarterback who is a step down in class from what most NFL quarterbacks are with regard to Will Levis. So that game's going to be interesting. There's some things to break down on that game later on, but those are my thoughts on the Trevor Lawrence thing. Why don't we go over to Kirk Cousins, Matt? Okay, so we saw the Atlanta Falcons lose to the Los Angeles Chargers in a game that they probably should have won. If you're an objective observer, you're going to say that 7 out of 10 times at least, with the stats the way that they were, with the yardage the way that it was, that the Atlanta Falcons would win that game. The Los Angeles Chargers offense did very little in that game. They had one receiver who did okay. They had nobody else really. They did not have much of a run game. And the Atlanta Falcons were moving the football. Kirk Cousins just lost them that game. And you could say the same thing sort of is true with Jameis Winston, right? Like they were moving the football and Jameis Winston lost them that game. The difference is that Kirk Cousins didn't look quite right in losing that game. Jameis Winston is Jameis Winston is another kind of cat, right? Like he is. I tweeted something out yesterday that I thought was pretty funny, but very appropriate. Son says, "Dad, what was watching Jameis Winston look like?" Dad says, with tears welling up in his eyes, "It was glorious, like watching 1,000 fireworks fire erroneously." Like Jameis Winston, you never know what you're going to get from him, but he can push the ball down the field. He's got the arm strength. He's got the arm talent. He just doesn't have the right decision-making at points. And of course, now he's praying that he doesn't throw any, he gets blessed and not to throw any more pick sixes. But I want to pull up I'll tweet this out later today, but here's the video of Kirk Cousins. You can go full screen with this, Matt. This is every single one of his dropbacks, 1 to whatever it was, 40 something, however many he had. Just in the pocket, got the end zone view. I've cropped it. You know, we are continuing to see, and I'm no quarterback expert in technique and the way that you pass the football. I've watched thousands and thousands of games and watched quarterbacks very closely, but I'm not a quarterback coach. To me, what we have seen throughout the season is that Kirk Cousins is not pushing off that back foot, which was his surgically repaired foot, nearly as strongly as he once did, or potentially as he needs to in order to get the proper velocity on the football so that it gets to where it needs to go. There are times that he can fire it in with his arm, but if you're talking about pushing into the football to get an accurate pass deeper down the field, we are not seeing that right now from Kirk Cousins, and it's been hit or miss for much of the year. You figured that he would come off of the bye with extra time to prepare and be sort of at his best, right? Like in terms of he's had time to rehab, he's had time to rest things, he gets back situated. My current working hypothesis here, and I could be totally wrong, so this is just my own thought on this. I haven't heard anybody else mention it. Maybe somebody else has. Kirk Cousins, for most of the season, has been throwing the football with too much of his arm into the football and not enough of his lower body, specifically the leg that he drives off of, that right leg, pushing into the throws. And if you repeatedly do that, pass after pass, game after game, week after week, month after month, I have to believe if you've never thrown the football like that previously, like if you were getting more of your lower body, your right leg pushing into the ground to help drive these throws, if you are using your arm to do it as opposed to your leg, maybe you can do that at the beginning of the season, right? Like maybe that would end up, you could adjust your mechanics slightly so that it works out. But at some point, that fatigue has to set in, right? Like those muscles on that right throwing arm cannot continue to bear the weight of the majority of your pass because you're not using the right leg to drive into the throws as much. And so over those throws, weeks and months of doing that, eventually it will wear down. It will slow down. You might not have the same zip on your throws. And I don't know if this is the beginning of that, but we certainly saw some of these throws, even some of these completions to the sideline, just not really, on occasion he's trying to put some touch on it, but just not really getting fired in there. Now, you're right, Jimmy. I mean, he is definitely lifting that back foot. He is definitely trying not to get as much push off of it. And so this is like my point is he's using other means of strength in his body and other muscles to try to get the ball down the field rather than what he typically would be utilizing. And so I do wonder if this ends up becoming far more of an issue for him as the weeks continue to progress here towards the end of the season. And the reason this is a factor is that the Falcons are 6-6. The Falcons are in the playoff hunt. And so they have that interesting decision, sort of like Mike Tomlin had, weeks ago. The difference for Mike Tomlin was a little bit easier, but at that point, the Steelers were 4-2, I believe. And he said, we're going with Russell Wilson. And we stuck Russell Wilson in it. Russell Wilson was a proven NFL quarterback who has won in the past. And Justin Fields was a quarterback who has struggled in the past. The difference here is that Kirk Cousins has won games in the past. He's done a lot better, had a lot more success in the NFL, far more experience, knows defenses much more inside and out than does Justin Fields. So Kirk has a higher starting point than did Justin Fields. And Michael Penix is a rookie. We have no idea what his ceiling could be, right? We presume he's definitely got a stronger arm than Kirk Cousins right now. He definitely, these are the things we know. He's got a stronger arm than Kirk does. He does not have an Achilles tear that he's recovering from. So his leg strength is better. He's going to be able to get better velocity on his football. And he's looked good in spurts in the preseason. So those are three things we know about Michael Penix Jr. What we don't know is his ability to read defenses. Pretend if you are lobbying for Michael Penix Jr. to start this game against the Minnesota Vikings. Does he understand all the complicated blitzes that Brian Flores likes to bring? Does he know where to go with the football in these situations? Is he going to get fooled more frequently than Kirk potentially gets fooled? There's a lot of questions there as it relates to, he could be more talented and certainly will have a higher ceiling eventually in his career than what Kirk does right now, right? If you said, as of today, what is the ceiling of both of these quarterbacks? There's no doubt Michael Penix has a higher ceiling. There's a lot more variance, but has that higher ceiling than what Kirk Cousins does right now at the tail end of his career, recovering from that Achilles. But this team is trying to win a game this week against the Vikings. They are trying to win next week. They are trying to win enough games to go to the playoffs. Maybe Penix can be the guy to do that. I don't really know the answer there. I'm just throwing out the pros and cons of both. What I am going to talk about, I've already identified some of the issues that Kirk Cousins visually from my layman's eyes has with his pocket presence, his mobility, his arm strength, and what we're seeing on tape. Let's now look at the matchup that he has here. So Matt, let's start with the first graphic as we talk a little bit more about the game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Atlanta Falcons. So we're going to go through three different iterations of defense versus offense. When the defense graphic is up, we're going to target the Minnesota Vikings on here, and we're going to find them. When the offense graphic comes up, we're going to target the Atlanta Falcons offense, and we're going to find them. This first graphic is defensive pressure versus blitz rate. If you look towards the top of this graphic, you will see that the Minnesota Vikings have well above average pressure rate and the second highest blitz rate. Brian Flores, they love to blitz, and they do get a lot of pressure when they blitz. There are some teams that blitz at above average rate that get very little pressure off of it. Look at the Giants where they sit, the Raiders where they sit, the Carolina Panthers where they sit. That's not the case for the Denver Broncos, and most importantly for this game, the Minnesota Vikings. The pressure, they blitz a lot, and they get a lot of pressure. So let's look at the next graphic, Matt, and let's talk about where Kirk Cousins is. On the x-axis is EPA per attempt when pressured. Quarterbacks and teams that are over there on the right hold up relatively well when they are pressured, all things being considered. You can see from an EPA per play perspective, these are still not great results, right? The best quarterback in the league is Joe Burrow with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's barely over positive EPA when he's pressured. Every other team has negative EPA when they're pressured, right? So it's obviously better not to be pressured. You're going to have better results. The y-axis shows EPA per attempt when not pressured. If you're over there in that top left quadrant, you are a team and a quarterback that is very good when you're not pressured and very bad when you are pressured. And lo and behold, the Atlanta Falcons sit there in that top left quadrant with the top 10 best EPA per pass attempt when they're not being pressured, but the number 31 EPA per attempt when they are pressured. Only Anthony Richardson is worse than Kirk Cousins when being put under pressure from an EPA per attempt perspective this year. It's been terrible. So he's going up against a team now in the Minnesota Vikings that gets a lot of pressure. Let's go to the next graphic, Matt. Going back to the defensive side of the ball, we're going to look for the Minnesota Vikings on here. This is the rate of man coverage that teams use. And up there in the top left quadrant, you could see the Minnesota Vikings use second lowest rate of man coverage in the NFL, one of the highest rates of zone coverage in the NFL. So they are using a ton of zone coverage. They're a team on the far end of the spectrum that plays basically no man coverage. So let's look at the next graphic, Matt. This is quarterback EPA per attempt man versus zone. We're again going to first identify the axis here. We've got on the x-axis EPA per attempt versus man coverage. So if you're over there on the right, you're really good against man coverage. On the left, you're really bad against man coverage. The y-axis is EPA per attempt versus zone coverage. At the top, you're really good versus zone when you pass the ball. And at the bottom, you're really bad versus zone when you pass the ball. Now we're going to find the Atlanta Falcons. And once again, the Atlanta Falcons sit at an extreme. The Atlanta Falcons offense is the third most efficient EPA per attempt offense when they play man coverage. They're very good. Kirk Cousins has done excellent this year against man coverage. However, against zone coverage, you can see he's below average. There's still about 10 teams or 11 teams that are worse than him when they face zone. But he is significantly worse than when he plays man coverage. And you can see he's averaging about, if I had to use a guesstimate here based upon only this graphic, plus 0.34 EPA per attempt versus man and basically 0 EPA per attempt versus zone. So a massive difference. One of the largest splits in the NFL. Let's look at the next graphic, Matt. Okay, now we're going to look at defensive usage of too high. The Minnesota Vikings are over there on the far right, and the x-axis is the main one we want to pay attention to here. Which teams use the highest rates of too high coverage? And the Minnesota Vikings by far and away lead the NFL in usage of too high. They are like at 57% or so. The NFL average is like 38%. So the Minnesota Vikings are way above average. They're way above number 2. They're by far and away the number 1 team in usage of too high. Let's go to the next graphic, Matt. Where does Kirk Cousins, how does he play against too high? If you're over there on the far right, based on the x-axis, you're great versus too high. The teams and the quarterbacks that are the best against too high are over on the far right. The teams that are on the worst against too high are over there on the far left. On the y-axis is your EPA per attempt versus anything other than too high. We're not just talking cover 2, we're talking cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, 2-man, etc. All the too high safety defenses are on the x-axis. Anything other than that, you're on the y-axis. If you're up there in that top left quadrant, like the Atlanta Falcons are, you are horrific against too high, and you are outstanding against anything other than too high. So if you imagine like a diagonal line running through this graphic from lower left to top right, which I didn't have a chance to draw it on this graphic here, but I have it in my notes. The further away you are from that diagonal line that would mark out, -10 on both axes, zeros on both axes, plus 0.10 on both axes. The further away you are from that, the more sensitive you are to going up against too high. And Kirk Cousins is the most sensitive quarterback. He is the worst in terms of the biggest splits against too high. Now, statistically, they're the fourth worst team against too high. But the point is they have the largest splits. And so when you're going up against a team and you're thinking about Kirk Cousins and you're thinking about what he wants to do, and then you move to, oh, but now he's facing a team that goes up, that plays a ton of too high, you're going to get a drop off in production. So it's fascinating thinking about. So Peter, I'll answer your question right now. Which Falcons pass catcher is the best versus man coverage? We're not going to get much man coverage, but what we will tell you, if you pay attention to Rich Rebar's worksheet this week, he will break down for you which receivers do the best against too high. Rich's worksheets are outstanding for covering these types of things every single week. Which teams have the best matchup, which quarterbacks have the best matchup, which wide receivers or tight ends do the best against the different coverages that they're expected to face. So we'll get into those details later on this week. But the bottom line here is that I'm going to be fascinated to see how Kirk Cousins performs. You have the health question mark, which is certainly a question mark, and then you have the matchup question mark, which is obviously a matchup that is problematic from a structural perspective for Kirk Cousins. The Falcons offense does not perform well when he's pressured, does not perform well against zone, does not perform well against too high specifically. And he's going up against a team that gets above average rates of pressure, the second highest blitz rate, that plays some of the lowest rates of man coverage, and has by far the highest rate of too high. So I can't wait to watch how he performs in this spot and like how he rebounds, and then what happens to the Atlanta Falcons from a coaching perspective about what that discussion is coming out of Raheem Morris, about Michael Penix, about the potential for switching. Does Kirk play and the wheels fall off? Does he play and get a little better? Which I would be surprised, but you never know. Or do they make a switch? Those are really kind of the three options that the Falcons have, or the results that could potentially occur here. And then how that translates into them making or missing the playoffs. And Dagino, I can't pronounce it. I think it's your first and last name combined, but appreciate it. Great breakdown. Thank you. You're right, Peter. The Vikings might want to get revenge on him for leaving them. But I will say this. If the Vikings wanted to pay him, he probably would be in Minnesota. There is a reason that the Minnesota Vikings decided they did not want to. And they're a team, think about it. Kevin O'Connell worked with Kirk Cousins for several years. He knows what Kirk likes and what Kirk doesn't like. He knows what he wants to do when he sees a certain thing. Like, as a quarterback as old as Kirk Cousins, if you got a rookie quarterback in here, like Michael Penix, and Michael Penix has a certain tendency against, middle of the field closed coverage to do X, Y, or Z, you can maybe coach that out of him, right? You could, we need you to go here with it. With a guy like Kirk, who's been there and done that, he's not going to be able to change his instincts with 1 week that he's built up over decades of playing in the NFL, particularly the last several years. And so those years have mostly been in Minnesota. So you could try to bait him into a few things here potentially with showing one thing, and you know what he likes to do when he sees that. And so then you can then make a last minute switch and trigger him and trick him that certainly could be things that happen here. Kirk obviously has a little bit of familiarity with that defense, though. So, like, it's not all 100% one-sided road against Kirk Cousins. He could try to come up with some things that he anticipates what they might do. And obviously, this is going to be called like a Cousins revenge game. He could be trying to go up against his old team. So, like, it's not 100% all in favor of the Vikings here. There are some question marks. It's going to be fascinating. There's going to be a lot of discussion this week about this particular game. So I can't wait to see the dialogue as it continues and see how this thing goes. Before we get into our next subject, so week 13 we just concluded. That was our most profitable week over the last month. And one of the interesting things is, I'm not sure how many of you guys that are listening, watching this on X or on YouTube are subscribers of the service. We did a free week a few weeks ago where we gave everything for free. One of the things that we've been focusing a little bit more on this year has been the player prop market. Oftentimes when you have like years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, before so many shops were open, before props were just widely available at so many different spots, and you could get either larger limits down like you can now, or some spots limit you, but you got a lot of outs that you can spread your money across. Before all of that, if you saw something from an injury perspective, or you saw something from a player usage perspective, you had to see how that could factor into the larger scheme of things, the grander scheme of things of like, well, how's this going to affect the total of this game? How's this going to affect one of the point spreads of the game? Would I look at the first half laying the points, or the second, or the full game? All these different avenues. It's a lot easier now to just focus in on the exact thing that you want to bet and then try to bet that. Now, I think this guy's usage is going to go down. I don't care. I don't need to worry about how that impacts the overall game. I'm just going to bet a player prop or 3 player props, and also other players as they directly relate to the guy that I'm betting on or against. And it's so much easier to focus your effort and energy there and make money doing that than it is trying to zoom out and see how watered down that analysis would be over the course of a full point spread for a game, let's say. And so for that reason, we have naturally focused a little bit more on where we think we're going to be able to make the most money betting on the NFL this year. And it's been in the player prop market. Our elevated props on Sunday and Monday, we were 5-0. We won last night. We went 4-0 on Sunday. Elevated props this year are 87 and 48. This is our strongest props that we focused on. We see a value there. I gave out 2 of them on the show last week. We hit both of those. We're hitting 64% of those on the season, with over 150 of those in the NFL. Our computer totals are doing great. Our props are doing great. And as I mentioned before, $100 better is up over $12,000 following our plays this season. And it's been our most profitable year on record. So for that reason, we are allowing, if you want to get on board for the rest of the season, not a weekly package, but the rest of the season, if you've seen enough from these shows, especially on Fridays, we're giving out winners and winners, and there's plenty more of those to our paid subscribers. You can get 73% off the rest of the season. Use code SHOW73. That will end tonight. This is the last time we're extending sort of the Cyber Monday sale just to this podcast. SHOW73 gets you 73% off the rest of the season. Okay. We need to get into some of our strength of schedule before we get you out of here. So, Matt, why don't we bring up the strength of schedule? Okay. We got some comments. I got to get to these. Boyd Gaming has completely stopped listing Gibbs' longest rush over on a weekly basis. Are they giving you a one-way market there, Exile? Are they only letting you bet the under? Or are they not listing it at all? Let me see. Let's look. So yeah, I'm not sure what. Yes, one way. What a joke. That's pitiful. That is pitiful. Gibbs longest every week. Hit the like button, everyone. Thank you. Yes, please hit the like button. Postseason college championship weekend is included in regular season. So we've got some things lined up for this upcoming weekend. That's all part of what you've paid for. If you're part of the regular season package, you don't need to worry about that. Postseason is the bowls. College bowls is postseason. So you don't have to worry about that. Although if you are a regular season subscriber and you've been getting those mailers, I highly suggest that you jump on board sooner rather than later so you can take advantage of the coupon that you received as part of that. Okay, Matt, let's get into strength of schedule right now. All right, so as we normally do here, you're familiar with this, but just to recap, the graphic is sorted. Both graphics are sorted by the top one, which is showing you the past strength of schedule from weeks 8 to 13, so the last 6 weeks. So this is you're looking at the defensive efficiency of opponents, so it's from the eyes of an offense. To make it clear, over on the top left is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have played the most difficult schedule of opposing defenses over the last 6 weeks. The Jaguars' offense has gone up against brutal defenses. On the other end of the spectrum, the Philadelphia Eagles offense has gone up against the NFL's easiest schedule of defenses over the last 6 weeks. So what we look for then is week 14 only. You navigate your eyes to the lower graphic now. Which teams have a bigger disparity in where they have been seeing from a rankings perspective of the opposing defenses to what they're going to see this upcoming week, whether it's a much easier defense or a much more difficult defense that they're going to face. So the Cincinnati Bengals are one example. They have played the fourth most difficult schedule of opposing defenses over the prior 6 weeks, and now they're going to be going up against the Dallas Cowboys, which is one of the easier defenses in the NFL to face. And so that's a big difference. That's going to help the Bengals offense look better in this particular game. The same can be said for the Tennessee Titans, who have played, the 8th most difficult schedule of defenses over the last 6 weeks, and now are going up against one of the very easiest in the Jacksonville Jaguars. Raiders offense should look a little bit better. Bills offense could look a little bit better as well, although it's hard to look much better than what they did against the San Francisco 49ers. Most of that was done on the ground, though. They should have some success throwing the football against this Rams defense, which struggles to defend some of those explosive pass plays as well. And so the Buffalo Bills are going to have nice change of pace, not just against the defense, but moving from that frozen field in Buffalo to Los Angeles, where they're taking on the Rams in LA on a late afternoon kick on Sunday. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we'll move our eyes to the right. A team like the Miami Dolphins plays a little bit more difficult schedule of the defense this week. They've been playing the second easiest schedule of defenses over the prior 6 weeks. Now they're going up against the New York Jets. Not a great defense, but still more difficult than what they've been playing. Now they could be down some cornerbacks. You got to pay attention to the injury report there as well. So it may not be quite as hard as what the average ranking suggests. The Kansas City Chiefs, they're going up against the Chargers this week. They've been playing the third easiest schedule of opposing defenses. This really depends on, do you think the Chargers are worthy of their ranking or not? I tend to think that they're not as good as what their year-to-date ranking is, so take that one with a little bit of a grain of salt. San Francisco 49ers, they are playing a more difficult defense in the Chicago Bears than what they've been facing previously. They're going to be doing so without both of their number one, number two running backs, and some other injuries, as well as the question marks surrounding, how healthy is Brock Purdy. Another one that sort of stands out that is just notable is that Atlanta Falcons game, where the Atlanta Falcons are now taking on, they haven't played an easy schedule, so it's not the first thing to jump off the page at you, but the fact that they are now playing this, difficult schedule opponent of the Minnesota Vikings defense, it could potentially impact their ceiling offensively. And since we've been talking about the Falcons earlier and their offense. Figured I'd point that out. Let's go to the next graphic, Matt. Okay, once again, we are going to pivot and we're going to be talking about the offenses and the offenses that you played. So whether or not it's going to be easier for your defense this week than it has been over the prior 6 weeks. So the Seattle Seahawks have played the most difficult schedule of offenses the prior 6 weeks. The Washington Commanders have played the easiest schedule of offenses the prior 6 weeks. They do not play this week. They are on a bye. Next closest team would be the Detroit Lions. So let's start there with the Detroit Lions. They have played the second easiest schedule of opposing offenses over the prior 6 games. And now they're going to be taking on the Green Bay Packers, a much more difficult offense than what they have been playing the prior 6 weeks. So a step up in class for their defense, which is down a couple of guys. And that game is going to be on Thursday night. So that will be very interesting to see how the Green Bay Packers offense is able to perform against this Lions defense, because they are a better offense than what the Lions have been playing of late. Let's move over back to the left-hand side of the graphic, and we'll talk about a team like the San Francisco 49ers, who've been playing the second most difficult schedule of offenses over the past 6 weeks. Now they go up against the Chicago Bears, as we mentioned previously. That is a big step down, going up against Caleb Williams and company. This 49ers defense could and should look better, because the Bears offense is not nearly the caliber of the second most difficult schedule of offenses that the 49ers have been accustomed to playing of late. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense. We mentioned the Titans offense going up against the Jaguars defense in the prior graphic would be a boost for their offense, because the Jaguars defense, not great, and they've been playing a lot of tough offenses. However, the same is true on the other side of the ball. The Jaguars defense has been playing the 4th toughest schedule of offenses. Now they get to go up against the Tennessee Titans offense, which with Will Levis is not good. And so this Jaguars defense, if there was a time for them to look a little bit better, could be in this spot, having played tough offenses for the prior 6 weeks and now going up against this Titans offense. The Eagles defense could look better. The Steelers defense could look better. The reason those teams could look better is because the offenses that they've been playing have been a lot better than average. And now they're going up against 2 of the worst offenses in the NFL. Now, Cleveland Browns showcase the fact that they are a better offense than their year-to-date rankings indicate, without Deshaun Watson and with Jameis Winston. So they are going to look better than this ranking indicates. Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young is certainly playing better now than what he's been playing before he got benched. And so maybe the Panthers don't have the 30th ranked offense in the NFL, but they still are going to be a step down in class, certainly, from what the Philadelphia Eagles defense has been accustomed to playing, as we talk about a team like the Baltimore Ravens, who they just faced and limited in their production. And so the Philadelphia Eagles defense certainly should look pretty good here. And they've done a great job over those last few weeks of limiting far better offenses. So it should be a lot easier against the Carolina Panthers offense. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another team that we'll mention here briefly. Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Las Vegas Raiders offense. Tampa Bay, they did struggle a little bit with Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers offense last week, but now they're going up against this Las Vegas Raiders team that, we could call up spade a spade. Antonio Pierce's bunch gave Patrick Mahomes all that they could handle on last week's game on Black Friday. That being said, now they got to get themselves back up for a team outside of their division, not a hated rival like Patrick Mahomes is, travel across country for early 1 p.m. kickoff against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's not going to necessarily be the easiest game for a team like the Raiders to get up for, literally and figuratively, at that time of day on their West Coast body clock time. And then just tagging on a couple of teams that are going up against more difficult offenses. The Minnesota Vikings have been playing a much easier schedule of offenses than average. Now they're going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Say what you want about the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins and everything I shared earlier. Part of the difficulty in processing this game, Vikings versus the Falcons, is that yes, the Falcons didn't put up very many points in the game against the Chargers, but the Chargers defense isn't terrible, right? Like they're not, top 5 in the league, though their ratings in some statistical categories may indicate that. But they still are definitely above average defense. And the Atlanta Falcons should have had more points in that game. They missed multiple kicks. They threw interceptions into the end zone, other places on the field, that not only resulted in points for the Chargers, but took points off the board for the Atlanta Falcons. So Atlanta should have scored more points in that game. The Minnesota Vikings have been playing some pretty bad offenses if you look at their schedule. If you look at the schedule of who the Minnesota Vikings have played here, they've taken on offenses including the Arizona Cardinals last week, who put up, 22 points. The Chicago Bears, not a great offense. They put up 27 against the Minnesota Vikings. The Tennessee Titans, not a great offense. The Tennessee Titans put up only 13. You got the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. You got the game against the Indianapolis Colts. None of these teams are good offenses, right? We're talking about almost the entirety of the AFC South, which with the Jaguars without Trevor Lawrence, the Titans, the Indianapolis Colts. The last time they played like an offense with a pulse besides the Arizona Cardinals was the Rams, who put up 30, or the Lions, who put up 31. Now, I'm not saying the Falcons are this team on the caliber of like the Lions by any stretch offensively, but they are better offensively than the Titans. They are better offensively than Mac Jones and the Jaguars. They are better offensively than the Indianapolis Colts. And so that's where there's like a lot of matchup things that are favoring the Vikings here, slowing down that Falcons offense. But this Vikings defense, I'm just not quite sure. They rank number 2 statistically, but they've been giving up some stuff to some of these offenses that definitely are not as good as what the number 2 defense should be doing, in my opinion. Now they're going up against a little bit of a more difficult offense in the Falcons. So that game is going to be fascinating. And you got the Rams, who are another team that's played a very easy schedule of opposing offenses. We saw what the Philadelphia Eagles ended up doing to them. But now the Rams are taking on the Buffalo Bills. So that's going to be a big step up in class for that LA Rams defense going up against the Buffalo Bills. And that game should be interesting. All right. Let's go back to a couple of Q&A here before we get out of here today. Shorter show, quicker show. I got a lot of other things I'm doing from a attacking the board perspective here that I need to dig into. So wanted to make this short and sweet. No guests today. We'll have all of our 3 guests as usual on the Friday show. I'm looking forward to getting back into this rhythm. You've got the Thanksgiving week, and there's lots of games, but they're all spread out and takes a lot of time. You got to hurry it up with your handicapping of these games and speed some things up. And as I said, we had our most profitable week over last month. I think it's our second most profitable week over the last 7 weeks, and we've been winning most of those weeks. So it was just a really good week, especially from props last week, that it ended up going pretty well for us. Normally, once things slow down, you don't have all the college games that you have to handicap. You can focus on these NFL games. You have a better handle on some of the injuries that you can dig into a little bit more because you have the extra time. Thanksgiving holiday's over. All the family is gone, and you could get back to work. I love this time of year from a betting perspective. Had a lot of success and enjoyed doing it. Hopefully, we continue to give you some profitable picks here on our Friday show. So I encourage you to tune into that. Make sure if you're over on YouTube watching us, go to the Sharp Football Analysis show and hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. Share some comments on the show. Share some of your opinions. We really appreciate all the feedback, and we'll take that into account. Jason, I will have to get to EDSR edges. One of my computers that has all the EDSR edges is not up right now, so I'm going to need to update that and get that to you on Friday. If you can tune in on Friday and remind me, I'll make sure to get that to you on Friday. Don't let me forget. Tell me in the comments that I promised I would get it to you on Friday, because I will. I appreciate all you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to the regulars. Thanks to all the new guys that I'm seeing here. And thanks to you guys for making it a great season. Hopefully you're participating in what we're doing from a private perspective, but also on the show here. We're going to try to continue to give you the best that we've got, and it's been working out well. So with that being said, good luck in the rest of your handicapping as you're watching some of these games, and thanks for your support to the show. We will see you Friday at noon Eastern.
Line, set,